I'm so thirsty.
And we're live.
Morning, guys. Happy Friday. We are
Hey.
live. It's Friday.
My God.
Live.
Listen.
Welcome to All Things New
I
with
know. That's on the
my
big thing.
beautiful sisters, Teresa, Joya, and Matisa. We're so excited to be with you all today. As you come in, say hello. Send up a greeting. Let us know where you are in the world. And you know what else to do. Become a share warrior. Hit that share
I'm
button.
sharing now.
And I'm going to share right now and take a few moments to get it on my page. Last week, we had an amazing conversation about girls and God and guns. And that kind of
great
conversation. We had more than we had almost like 3,500 people tune in for that discussion last week. That was pretty good.
I love it.
But in the course of having that conversation, we kind of sparked a new issue, and that was how soon is too soon to talk about sex, especially with our children. Because one of the things we had talked about is, if we, how soon should we introduce guns to our children, or should we, should we have those discussions? But I think one of the things Matisa said last week was that because guns were just a normal part of her life, it didn't really spark that interest or what have you. And so we kind of started thinking about, well, how would that work with sex? And, sex education and with our children, and whether or not you are a parent or you desire to be, if you're an aunt, a grandma, there's children around you. And because sex is so pervasive in our society, it's in our movies, they're teaching various things in school. We have them teaching gender identity in school. So, that kind of sparked our question, how soon is too soon to talk about sex? So one of the things I wanted to ask the people in our audience, but you ladies first, is did you ever have the talk with your parents? Were they secure enough to do that? And if so, when did you have that discussion? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go first. My mom was a nurse, and she was also a minister and in the church. And my stepmom was also a nurse. She just retired. And I can recall that my mom didn't say much other than, the Lord says, don't do it. Don't have sex. It's against the Bible. God said no, so don't do it.
Right.
And so we never really had any specific conversations. I do remember, as I was preparing for this today, I remember my stepmom awkwardly tried to tell me about it. And then she did what you did. She, because she's a nurse, she was drawing like, this and that. And
you're like, where's it on my body?
And I just remember like, oh my gosh, I think I blacked out or blacked everything out. But I was probably about 14, and I was mortified. And so I didn't take any of the information in, because my stepmom and I have a good relationship, but we didn't have that kind of relationship. Right. So that made it even worse that she would be trying to talk to me about sex.
That is hilarious. Joya, what was your experience? Okay, Joya can't hear. So Teresa, what was yours?
Okay. Pretty much like Matisa's. And my mom, of course, she is, good sanctified evangelist. And so my mom, her approach with her 3 daughters is, when you get engaged to be married, then she sits you down to have the talk.
What?
And so you do know that I'm still single, and so I have yet to have the talk with my mother. So my sisters who got married in their 20s, mommy sat down with them when they got, of course I eavesdropping on the conversation, like, wait, what y'all talking about? And so, she would tell them things about the experience or whatever. And so I even asked mom, probably at 40 years old, maybe even asked my mom, like, so when are you going to talk to me about sex? She was like, when you get married. When you get married, that's when I'm going to talk to you. Like, or maybe this is why I'm not married. Like, I need information. But it's just, I think it was in and of course I'm older than everybody here. So in our generation, it was taboo in the church. You didn't talk about it. And then, like, I remember when my girlfriends got married, I had 5 close girlfriends. We had this little group. And by the time I was 21, all 4 of my girlfriends were married. And so back in that day, when your girlfriends got married, you couldn't hang out with them anymore because they were like, they did married stuff. And they, so I lost like my close friendship with them. And so they could talk amongst each other about whatever was going on. But I still was left in the dark. So I was never talked to about it. I learned everything about sex in education and school, being curious, asking people. And I never, to this day, Mommy, if you're on, I'll call you afterwards. Just try to bridge. Can we try now, Mommy? Can we try now, Mommy?
That's so funny. Well, it's funny you should say that, Teresa, because I have been married. I have 2 kids, and I still haven't had the sex talk with my mother.
Oh, okay, your mother.
Yeah, no. We never had that formal discussion about like what to expect or anything about sexuality in general. The women in our family kind of developed early. So like when it came to like, getting lady parts and starting your cycle and stuff, it was just kind of like, man, now this has happened. So we didn't really even have that discussion. So Joya, can you hear us? Give us a thumbs up if you can hear.
Yes, I can hear a little bit.
So tell us about your experience. Have you had the talk? No, you haven't had the talk with Mommy?
With my mom, no. Her as a small kid, they were pastors. She was saved, so they raised me. We don't have sex until we're married, and that's all she said. When I got older and different things like that, hers was don't sleep around, because you sleep around with one guy, they're gonna talk about you. So that was her sex talk.
Sure.
If you sleep around with one guy, we're gonna talk about you, and that was the end. So no, it was no birds and bees around here. Yeah. And I have 2 other sisters, and they didn't have the talk either. So
yeah, it was so weird because of course, because my mom was so weird about sex, and like I can't even say sex to her now. She's like, stop cussing. Because we get taught about sex as though it's a shameful thing and that it's bad. And so I kind of wanted to shift that perspective for my kids, and I wanted to teach them in a way that made it more sacred and more special than shameful. So it was still a difficult conversation to have because, like I told you, I was trying to draw pictures and like, I don't know. But I think it's one of those things that's really, really important. And I don't know how well I would have done having a son. But I will say this, it's probably important for, or maybe we should talk about this. Like, would you have felt as comfortable having that conversation with your father? Like, do you think like the parent of the opposite sex should also talk to the child about sex, and perhaps that might bring a healthier discussion about sex rather than, we're all saved, we just don't do it until we're married. But then what do we do when we do get married?
Right. I think that's a good question, Dana. So my children are 10 and 12. And we're constantly, Lawrence and I are constantly having conversations about how to bring this in. How do we, talk to our kids? I will say that what we decided to do early on was not to talk about sex per se, because they were too small, but to make conversations about the body, hormones, puberty, all of that stuff very normal. So as our kids develop, we're not crass by any stretch of the imagination, but having a conversation about development isn't something that shames my children from a clinical perspective. Now, obviously not, if somebody else were to say something, they would know that's a wrong conversation to have. But we did that purposely because for me, sex was so taboo. And whoever said this before, I think, Dana, you did. If somebody said that in my presence and my mom's presence, I would have been mortified. Right. But I'll tell you this, I actually wrote my doctoral dissertation on kids having sex because, and Teresa, you'll know this, I was going to conventions, and Dana, maybe you will too, where I don't know what was going on with the Saints kids, but they were sexing it up. Out of control. The conventions were... They were having after parties after service. Church. Girl. And I'm like, but we were told we weren't supposed to do that. But they were clearly, And what I wanted to know, and this relates to your question, Dana, is why would certain kids talk to their parents, and how will that impact whether or not they chose to have sex? And what I found in my study is the closer you are to your parents and the more you have open dialogue, the less likely you are to make those risky behaviors. And I'll say this lastly, those kids who do jump into it early with no knowledge are more likely to do it with no contraceptives and end up pregnant.
Right.
So that's a whole other conversation. So would I want my daddy to talk about it? No. But I do think that there is something good about having those as much as you can with your mom and your dad if possible.
Well, here's the thing. So when there were two things that I really liked about when Danielle kind of, came into womanhood. My mother-in-law chose to celebrate that as like a rite of passage. Like for me, it was like embarrassing. I was like, what is happening to my body? But we kind of prepared for her because we knew that the women in our families developed early. And so I didn't want her to be shocked and scared and, think something's wrong with her, that she's going to die. But then, and I always had like the negative connotation of it because I was like, oh man, now I have to do this every month for the rest of my life, But instead, we turned it into like a celebration of, oh, now you're a woman, and we had cupcakes and all.
I love that.
But get this, my husband was secure enough in his masculinity and his fatherhood that he went out and got feminine products for her, and like he was a part of the celebration too. So it didn't make it like this weird conversation, and it wasn't uncomfortable. And it's not like, he didn't go all, ooh, girly stuff. Because, my dad was kind of like that. He was like, girl stuff, no, forget it. I don't, keep that girly stuff away from me. But my husband was like, really like into like the celebration and like, making her feel comfortable with it and making her feel like it was a normal transition and normal part of what was going to happen to her.
How did they respond to that, Dana, just out of curiosity?
I mean, there's still that shyness and uncomfortability because, you're still talking about your body.
Right.
And it's private and, you don't want to think about your dad in that way. But, then too, like because they didn't have any information, I don't think it was too weird. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Because it was the way he did it. It was, even though they were kind of embarrassed, like, come on, Dad. But like, it's still that, he took the time to care and be that way.
That's good. That's good.
I love that. And my dad was just the dad. He probably talked to my brothers, I'm so sure, about it. But like the dad didn't talk to the girls about it and the mom didn't talk to the boys in my household. At least it seemed to be that way. But I really believe it was taboo, not just in the church. I think it was taboo, in secular circles. It was just like, ooh, that was something. It was always like, don't do that, or you're going to be considered a fast girl, or it wasn't even so much the Christianity piece as much as it was. This is, I think the world viewed it as this is something sacred for marriage.
Well, and not even just, I think the way we presented it is, again, not that sacred. We tried to present it, like the church tried to present it as sacred, but there was still an element of shame to it. You know what I mean? And like, because I know like married couples who, there was this one young couple, because they've been told no for so long and been told you don't do it, it's and make a big deal about it, that by the time they could do it, like they were stuck with like, well, I still feel like it's tainted even though I'm enjoying it with my spouse. So I think we have to find that balance of really teaching it as that it is sacred, it is special, and even just talking about like our sexuality in general. That it's okay to have sexual feelings. That's one of the things that I always wanted my kids to understand. You're normal for feeling that way. You like Kenny Barnes. You should like Kenny Barnes. He's cute, whatever. That's normal. But I didn't want to make them feel like, ew, you like a boy, you fast, and all the other things that we kind of got brought up with. Right. And because I remember, because I did develop early, like my mom would like, I went from being able to just wear a t-shirt to having to now wear something under it. And it was that the boys wouldn't look at me. And I was like, well, like, what does that do? So instead of like making them feel ashamed about, the developments that occurred in their body, I wanted them to, because it's normal, it's natural, but this is what you do with those feelings. Let's those feelings,
I love that.
Marriage or.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, Dana. And again, that's kind of what we try to do in our household. We talk about everything surrounding it. Sex, to me, it shouldn't be like that's the conversation. If you're waiting to talk to your kids about sex at whatever age you're talking to them, it's way too late, right? So to your point, as girls are developing, and again, my mom didn't talk to me about any of that, but when I'm talking to my daughter as she's developing into a young woman, I do want her to know what's natural and normal, and I don't want her to scare her or body shame her, to your point, or make her think that, because if a little boy does like her, I mean, she used to have little boys walking her to class every day. Taya from kindergarten has had. So we have conversations about, how to be ladylike and present yourself in a certain way. But at the same time, I think if we start talking about it at the time when they might be thinking about it, we are behind the 8 ball, because there's so much that surrounds, like you said, sexuality and sex and your body changing and all of that. Yeah.
I think it's most important that we do get ahead of the curve, because like now it seems like we're always so surprised with media, like that kids are doing drugs in elementary school, like kids are having sex, or kids are bringing guns. That's what I think sparked it last week for us, that kids are exposed so early. So just like you said, Tisa, that as soon as we're thinking about it's time to talk about it, they've already had the conversation with their friends. And then the part for me is, by the time they're talking about it, they're experimenting. Or by the time your daughter is curious, a boy is showing her the ABCs of it, and of course, probably the wrong way. And God forbid if it's somebody older that has gotten to them. That's why I think it's never too early. As soon as they start understanding it, kids always are like, why this and why that? They're curious. They're asking the questions. When they start asking, we need to start having that conversation. I think that's the perfect time. It's based on their understanding and their exposure. Now, there are some 21-year-olds that haven't had any exposure, so they don't even know to ask. So, but like there are we have brilliant kids. Tisa, your kids, Taya and Deshaun, are adults. Like they can have an adult conversation, and it's not going to be like, "What's the birds and bees?" They're going to be like, "Now about this sex situation." Like when a man and a woman, like and you can't come to them with, and this is and I'll say this, and I'm trying to stay on track. My mind is everywhere. When we were younger, even in the church, I was saved because I didn't want to go to hell. I didn't ask no questions. I wasn't reasoning with nobody. Now that doesn't work anymore. You can't it's holiness or hell. You gotta live. Okay, I gotta do this because I gotta live right. It's like, no, this living right thing. So talk to me about it. Why is our way right? Why do we have to sustain? So we have to be educated in having the conversation with them. You can't go to Tay and Deshaun and be like, oh, it's the birds and the bees, and then 9 months later a stork comes bringing the baby. No. What I need to know about what y'all turn off on the TV when it gets to that part.
Exactly.
What's that? Tell me about that. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, even me as an auntie, to have an adult conversation by the time they ask an adult question.
Yeah, because I made a decision, even though I cringe inside sometimes. I might I'm hugging them like, oh my God, I'm cringing because you don't want to think of your children even moving into that, that part of their life. But I have made a commitment to myself. I don't care how embarrassed I am on the inside. I don't care how much I cringe.
That's so good.
You will not learn from the world what I am supposed to be teaching you in our house. And I don't care if, I don't know if we're going to get on this topic or not, but even conversations about birth control and all of that, y'all can play it want to and act like your kids aren't going to be exposed to that, but you're going to find yourself in a real bad situation, and it's not going to be their fault.
Right. And that brings me to another thing, Matita, because we always talked about sex in the sense of, well, don't get pregnant, that kind of thing, right? But then you just thought they weren't going to do anything. You know what I mean? And then not talking about, and then making even pregnancy one of the negative things that is a result of sex. Pregnancy is a wonderful result of sex when it's inside the confines of marriage. That's what we really wanted to teach. But we end up telling girls, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant. And then we put all the responsibility for sexuality on them. And then we don't have the conversation with our boys. And then we do, we are disappointed. But then pregnancy isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. We don't
talk about disease, right?
We don't talk about the diseases that can happen. We don't even talk about the spiritual consequences.
Connection. Ooh, that's good.
And intimacy with someone else, and especially outside the covenant of marriage.
There you go.
That's excellent, Dana.
And kids should be able to hear and understand at their level about soul ties and connections, like you said, outside of that covenant. I really believe now kids are still going to make decisions, but if they make informed choices, and I would even say this, and I love Dana's point. I remember in a former church years and years and years and years ago, we didn't really talk about sex and all that kind of stuff, and the pastor's daughter ended up pregnant. And, at that point, and I probably participated in it, and I repent right now, at that time when we were younger, pregnancy was final for people. Like we shamed them, we ostracized them. You better talk about it. And I'm not saying at all, we don't want our children to go that route. We want them to get married and all that kind of stuff. But we also have to know grace is working. I want to talk to Taya and Deshaun along the way. And guess what? I don't want them to hide when they've made a mistake.
That's it.
That's good.
Because I want to be open and let you know, even with consequences, I'm going to love you through it.
Even with consequences.
Yes.
And that's one of the things I told my girls too, because of course they're cute and then, they're developed early and all those things. And, the last thing I wanted to do is be a grandmother out of, whatever. But the other thing too is not just the responsibility of raising a child and having that whole life be your responsibility. But like you said, Matisa, I don't care what you do. I'm there to support you. And I don't want you to hide when you're in trouble, if you make a mistake, if you fall. And we did have those conversations, where it was like, eventually they do come to you and tell you XYZ. And like you said, no matter how much I cringe inside, no matter how much I'm like, oh, I'm going to be that fortress for you, and I'm going to be that covering for you. I'm going to be that protector for you. I'm going to be that advocate for you. There's nothing that you can't tell me that I won't be there to help you with, defend you with, cover you with, pray for you with, get you through. That's good. So don't, I'm the one who's on your side. That's don't, good. Don't hide. It's that whole like Adam and Eve thing, the naked and unashamed. Yeah. Until they came into what they knew, then they tried to hide from the one person who had the capacity to forgive them, to restore them, to help them.
That's good.
That's right.
And like somebody just stated on the screen, like they had to go before the church and apologize. And I came from the church where you got sat down, silenced, disfellowship, like had to come before the church. And it was like they shamed them and didn't educate them. And so then either they turn away from God because they're like, man, this is where I'm supposed to come for healing. I messed up. I made a mistake that my body naturally tended to do. And then nobody's going to explain to me. Like, then I'm ostracized. I'm kicked out of church. And then you're marked. I don't know if you guys remember the Scarlet Letter.
Yes.
Yeah. You wearing the proverbial scarlet letter at your church or around your friends. And then it's just like, oh, that's all bad. But it's like nobody takes the time to sit down and say, let me give you this information. Like Attorney Travis, thank you, Bishop. He said, I'm gonna let me stop long enough just to give you the information. Just so you don't go out and then continue to perpetuate it, because you're not going to tell your kids, or I think some people take on, and I've seen this before in young people, they take on that I'm a terrible person or I'm bad. And then the rest of their life goes downhill after that. Oh, I had a baby out of the way. Like my life, I'm ruined. I'll be on food stamps the rest of my life and nothing will ever work for me. Or this is what I really didn't like in the church. As soon as you get pregnant, I had a friend, they got pregnant. She found out she was pregnant on Friday. They made them get married on Monday. They didn't even like each other. And it's like, I was like, two wrongs definitely don't make it right. But in the church, it's like, oh, you married and you got pregnant. Now y'all got to get married. And it's just like, what are we doing? And so I think they were trying to fix the wrong so fast that they didn't even address what it is. And we can't do that.
But you know what? I love this conversation so much, and I'm hoping that people are getting something out of it. I wish we could have had these conversations when I was younger. But I'm even thinking about like, and I would love to hear, you know, if you all think that we should be talking to girls and boys differently, kind of how that goes. But I was
my next one.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking about, as you guys were talking, like one thing I think about even with Taya and Deshaun, I talked to Taya probably more, and I pushed Lawrence toward Deshaun. But you know, sex, especially for women, is much more than a single act.
Yes.
It is mental and emotional and so much more. So why is the act the only thing that we think is necessary for conversation?
Right.
Like, I'm talking to her about guys getting in her brain. You know, she's 10, so we're having two deep conversations. But I'm planting some seeds. You know, because that's the thing that, you know, guys can hook you and reel you in, and it becomes then this physical thing. And so I'm trying to ask the Lord to let me watch her characteristics, the things that she says, how, you know, things that she's attracted to, and then plant seeds that in that moment will her think, oh, I remember me and mom talked about this.
Yes.
He's doing it. She was.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. And then you build, it's a bond that you build with your daughter or your son. And it's like, my mom was right. Or I love, you know, we always thought about it as, oh, you have the cool mom, or your mom is young or whatever. But it's like, you could go to your mom about something, because normally, like in school, and I remember being a junior high and in high school, the girls, we came at each other because our mothers would kill us if they knew. And then somebody gets pregnant and then their mom doesn't kill them. And we're like, your mom, like, what? She talked you through it. She's helping you. She's going to the doctor with you. And it's like, all we knew is this was horrible. You know, you were going to be put out the family. And, you know, we never thought that somebody's going to hug me and love me and tell me about this mistake and talk to me about the reasons why it should never happen again. And that you're not thrown down as a result of it. I'm not shaming you into being, you're a horrible person for the rest of your life, and I'm gonna love you into some correction. But Matisa, you said one good thing about, not, you said out of everything you said, one thing was good. But no, the good thing that I love that you said is that guys try to get in their mind. Like, Taya is gonna be a strong Black woman, and I know she got it from you, so she don't even need her aunties. But if Joya, Dana, and I, look, we're gonna be right there with her. Look, don't let that little boy say this about you, and like, don't let them, because now predators, they court our kids. You know, they you know, bring them in and they build trust with them to get them in a place to where, like, I want Taya to be like, oh, my mother told me that, and Auntie Teresa and Dana said, like, absolutely not. I know this little boy trying to, you know, it's more than defiling their body. It's like, don't get in their head and emotional abuse me and make me feel like, oh, because you're not putting out, you're like, you're a prude or whatever it is. Man, it's so much more than just having the conversation about sex.
Right. And that's where it also transitions into how we talk about the boys, talk to the boys about sex, and who is having those conversations. You know, even when we think back to our previous conversations about, you know, fathers being incarcerated and not having, you know, access to their children, like, who's teaching our sons, you know, about sex? Who's teaching our nephews and, you know, our cousins about sex? Where's the male influence?
I love that.
And we have to think about this. And I was really thinking about this. I was like, you know, for us, marriage is us coming together, standing in front of family and vowing to be with each other. But in reality, sex is that covenant of marriage for God, because Adam and Eve, they didn't stand up in front of the garden and stand up in front of the Lord and say, I take you to be my whatever. But if they're coming together, that actually sealed them as husband and wife. So that's why you have to kind of be careful about making sure that you abstain until marriage. Like, that was one of the things, like, well, what's so special about marriage or whatever? And when you take into consideration that God only intended for you to have sex with one person, and that you were supposed to do that in perpetuity, you know, then you start, and that's where we talk about soul ties and things like that, because that is a blood covenant. When you give identity to a man, that's a blood covenant. That was the marriage. We call it now the consummation, but that really was the marriage. So if you consider that, you know, that person that you lose your virginity to or whatever, you have now entered into covenant with them, without really recognizing what you're doing. So those are some of the ramifications we don't think about either.
That's right. No, that's a really good point. I was sitting here thinking as you were talking about, I remember I taught a marriage and the family class. And it was upper class students. And I would always get kind of in-depth information, like what's going on, what's the hookup culture and just all this kind of stuff, which is mind-boggling and very, very scary. You know, all the one-night stands, and you don't have to have any kind of covenant. You don't even have to like the person.
Right.
But I remember asking them, do they want to be married? And for many of them, they talked about the hookup culture, but they wanted to be married. They just did not see many examples or models of people who had that covenant that you were just talking about, Dana. They were around people who were used to going from partner to partner, married, unmarried, but something within them, the majority of them, loved the idea of being in covenant with one partner. So when we talk about how we talk to our kids about sex, and even especially boys, because the culture for boys is to have sex with as many people as
possible
before you come into covenant. So how do we talk to our boys to let them know that you can be, and the other thing is, if you're not doing that, then you get the other conversations about, well, you must be gay and this, that, and the other. How do you have those kinds of conversations with the boys?
Well, you know, I actually had the opportunity to talk to my nephews about sex pretty early on. I didn't have as much communication with them as I would have liked to, just because, you know, my sister is, you know, a little out there and she's a little crazy, but like, I wanted to give them as much security and normalcy as I did with my daughters. So I didn't want them to take on that culture of, oh yeah, you know, go be with as many girls because that's going to give you clout or whatever, or that's going to give you credibility with your friends or whatever. Like, I wanted them to treat, and I always told them, like, you treat the person that you're going to date, court, love, have sex with, whatever, with the same respect that you treat your little sister. Like, would you, and you think about this, would you want someone treating your little sister like this? Would you want someone treating your mommy like this? Would you want some guy treating auntie like this? Right. And that kind of just, you know, shifted for them a little bit. But you know, those conversations have to be constant, and they have to come from different sources. It can't just be auntie, because then it's just auntie's crazy, right? You know? So it has to be, that message has to be reinforced throughout the family. And that's why I say, you know, should it be a conversation that I only have with my daughters, or, you know, should fathers have some, you know, and I know it makes you feel cringy inside, because as a parent, like, I remember having, you know, when I had girls, I was like, oh man, some guy's gonna want to have sex with them, you know. You know, but it's a natural part of life. It's how we keep our, you know, generations going. So I had to kind of put aside some of my feelings about that and recognize that it's normal. It's part of the cycle of life, you know. And so I think we just need to start trying to figure out how we can do that across the board with boys and girls.
Yeah. And somebody said that it's, you know, you can be a strong boss woman, but you can't teach a boy about sex. And I truly believe a man has to talk to a guy about, because there are things we could assume, but they need to hear from a dude, like their uncle, their dad isn't present, you know, a big brother at church, like somebody needs to have that conversation, but it needs to be held on both sides. And so one thing I mentioned is the climate of trust has to be there, because I think kids don't come to us because they don't trust us. They don't know, like, am I going to get it? You know, are they going to look at me differently? Like, am I going to be in trouble for even having this conversation? You know, will I be restricted? Like, I don't even know if people get put on punishment anymore, but it's like, I don't want to get in trouble for asking the question, but we have to present, now that we're the older generation, present the climate of trust to me. I've had it before where some of my girlfriend's kids, not you two, but my girlfriend's kids come to me because they're like, I can't talk to my mom about this. Yeah. But like, I trust you, Auntie Teresa. Like, what can, you know, and then I have to bridge that conversation between that parent and mom. It's like, you don't want to strangle her and kill her. Don't do it. You need to go to her, like, first of all, I'm going to protect you. And my mom used to always say something that made so much sense to me when I was on punishment or whatever. She could be beating me or whatever it was, but she would say, do you think I want to hurt you? I'm like, well, this belt feel like you're trying to take my life. But my mom would say, I don't want you hurt. You think I don't want you to have a boyfriend? I'm not telling you this so you can't have a boyfriend. Like, I'm not saying any of this to hold you down. I'm saying this stuff to help you.
Yeah.
And so I had to get to the mindset, and it didn't shift to me probably until I was an adult to see that she wasn't trying to hurt me. She wasn't trying to take away all my fun. Like, I would ask, can I spend a night at so-and-so's house? And mom, no, you cannot spend a night at their house. Yeah. And I was like, you just don't want me to have any friends.
Yes.
And it wasn't that. She was like, you think I don't want you to have friends? I want you to have friends. I don't want you to get exposed to something or somebody that you're not supposed to be around. And like, even now, I hate when people say, well, it happens where you're like, I never knew that person was a sexual predator. Like, oh God, we didn't even know it. Nobody could have told us that. But we have to be more in tune with our kids that, first of all, they got to know it's wrong. So if somebody comes to you with this, that is a no-no. And then they have to be able to be connected enough to you where you say, now, when you're in that environment, because I've seen so many stories about people who were abused or molested or whatever. And it's just like, I tried to tell my mom, and it's like, how did I not see it? How did I not know that they were at my grandmother's house? My uncle, my brother was touching them.
Right.
Like, we have to be more in tune. That's environment.
And we don't give kids the language to know what's going on. And it's like, so if we say what happened and they say, I don't know, like they don't know how to communicate what it is that they've experienced or what have you. And then two, I worked in the court system. And of course, I saw like all the, molestation cases and all that stuff. So I was kind of like your mom, Teresa. And I wanted my kids to know I wasn't a fun sucker. Like, I would let the kids come over our house all day long because I knew nothing was going to happen there. And I knew it was a safe place for them. But you really can't trust, and you really can't tell who a sexual predator is. But that too was why I started having the conversation with my kids so early, because I wanted them to know, this is this, that is that, this is your body parts, whatever. Go in the mirror, take a look at everything, inspect yourself, be comfortable with your body, but then know that you're the only person who can have access to that.
Absolutely.
If anybody else tries to gain access, you tell me and I'll deal with them.
Yep.
And I don't care who it is. I don't, and I always try to really, really lay that foundation with them. I don't care who you tell me. I will believe you.
Yes, absolutely. Because that is another issue that people, they don't think they're going to be believed. And again, if you're not having those conversations and they're not natural, right, they're not going to feel comfortable talking about them. Sharina asked the question, should churches offer sex education? We might, I don't know if we differ because we haven't talked about this. I say emphatically, the church should be talking about everything.
Everything. That's so good.
I think youth leaders should be trained.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. We want the church to talk about it, but we don't want people to be trained. Everybody is not a sex education specialist, but I do believe, and I think there should be some parameters, but I think there should be some classes where it's parents and children, where it's children and then it's parents and children. The more the church can insert the morality of what we're trying to teach our children, I personally think the better.
Yeah,
I agree. And it's funny because it doesn't just it's something that we talk about like in singles ministry, like after everybody's older and they've already made mistakes and we're trying to recover. But we definitely need to talk about it early on with our kids. And one of the things I always tell, even singles, is that we have to remember that God is the one who invented sex. It's not bad. It's not taboo. It's not nasty. It's normal. We don't blame people for, I always give this analogy. You have a stomach, you get hungry. It tells you some things. You have other body parts that cause you to feel other things. It's normal. It's natural. Nobody shames you for getting hungry. Nobody should shame you for having a sexual appetite because it's normal. God gave it to you, but he gave it to you to be enjoyed way. And it goes back to what your mom was saying, like all the rules, if we think about it, all the rules that God gives us are for our protection.
Yeah.
We tell our kids, don't put your finger in the socket. Not because we don't want you to have fun, but because we know it's dangerous for you. And if you look at all the things that God tells us to stay away from, it's because it's dangerous for you. We know that sex feels good. We know that it's a great exchange, but if it's taken out of its proper context, it leads to emotional issues, psychological issues, spiritual things. You know, one of the things that we typically don't talk about is like, along with soul ties, is like spiritually transmitted diseases. So you connect with somebody who has an anger problem, and then now you've committed, you're you know, together with this person, you're committed to them sexually or whatever, you engage with them, and then you suddenly wonder why I suddenly have an anger problem. Like those spirits will transfer based on the people that you build intimate relationships with. So we need to talk about that aspect of it as well. Like, we don't see the immediate danger in something that feels so good.
That's right. Right. So, and I would, hopefully we would all agree on this. The church has been silent, I think, for a long time. I mean, all of us have been in church for a number of years, especially the smaller, you know, and I don't want to stereotype, because there might be small churches doing amazing things. I don't know. But in a lot of the churches that I've been affiliated with, we've been so fearful. Our idea is, if we talk about it, people will do it. Well, I have news for all of us. People are going to do it anyway.
We don't talk about it, they're going to do it. If we talk about it, they're going to do it. But why wouldn't we find everything we need in the church? Why do I have to go somewhere else? Like, I'll never forget Dr. Carolyn Showell. She was the first psychologist I knew in church, apostolic church. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because we always, certain things, oh, that's secular, that's not for the church. I need everything in the church. I need you to be able to come here to get everything you need in life, because then it can be taught by educated people that have that awareness. And I'll never forget, just recently, a bishop was named in an apostolic church that he violated young girls. And if it would have been taught in our church, this is wrong, you're not supposed to have this done, because they get them at the age where they don't have the wherewithal to know, like, I knew it didn't feel right, but like, he was my spiritual dad. And it's like, if it's taught in church, like, no pastor in this church, no minister, no man, no male person in this church should be touching you, then it would have been like, hey, it's being, it's openly exposed there. So they don't even have the wherewithal. They don't even have the fodder or the ground to even get into anything like that, because they're exposed before it happens. And so my heart goes out to young ladies who, it's a manipulative thing that your boss or a person of authority can come to you, and it doesn't feel right, but it feels, good. And then it's like, what do you do? Like, it has to be exposed. It has to be put out there. But when the church is so, we shouldn't be talking about that. That's why I love this conversation today. How soon is too soon? Whenever they can talk about it. And then it should be, if we're going to teach it for kids that don't ask the question, when you have knowledge of understanding, we let people come to Christ when we're like, they're old enough to be baptized because they say they believe in Jesus or whatever. Anytime they have the wherewithal to make a decision about something, or we should be bracing them not to let a decision happen, we need to be talking about it. I don't think there's any time that's too soon.
Listen, the way I think about raising our children is we are preparing them to be productive, spiritually minded, independent adults.
Yeah.
And I love, as we're talking about in this conversation, sex is a part of who we are as a man. Bishop Travis just said it again when everyone talks about it, but he said before, it's mind, body, soul, and spirit. Right. So when I think about how to help children, protect them and direct them, it is every aspect of who they are, excuse me, and sexuality is part of that. And so I think we do ourselves a disservice. I think we do our community a disservice. I think we do the church a disservice.
Absolutely.
We don't impact that part of who our children are.
Right. And the other thing that we now have to include, because our society is just so perverse, is this whole gender confusion and gender identity. And, in my heart, I feel like I'm really a boy, or, all these things that they're even trying to introduce as part of curriculum.
Even in elementary school.
Yeah.
So you're trying to confuse children who are already, in their formative years, and we're trying to establish, like you said, Matisa, morality as a whole. So now we have to include this part. You are a boy. You were born a boy. You are going to love, marry, have sex with a girl. This is how, this is God's order of things. But that's one of those conversations and I've had to experience that too many times with little kids. Yeah. And I'm like, no, we've got to correct that.
And it's the enemy. I think it's a trick of the enemy. That, it comes to these kids and like elementary kids who are like, I have a family member who their child is in elementary school, and one of their classmates, a little girl of a different persuasion, she told her parents that she woke up one day and felt like she wanted to be a boy. They cut all her hair off, start letting her wear big shorts and sports, big jerseys and stuff. Mm-hmm. And when I went to my relative's house and saw this little girl, I was like, "Is that the same little girl from next door?" And they were like, "Yeah." She told her parents she wanted to be a boy, and before she can have a conversation with anybody about it, they done cut the little girl hair off. Wow. Dress her like a boy and allowing her to experience. She's experimenting that side, like maybe she was born that way. What? And people look at the church like, "Oh, you guys are so wrong because you say, correct them. Don't, you're suppressing what's in them, and then they'll fight it." You were born one way for a reason. If there's any cross signals where you feel like maybe you should have been something else, you need to talk to your maker about it. Talk to God who created you. God don't make any mistakes.
Right.
You were born a man and you're supposed to be a man.
Right.
But again, I think that supports what we're saying is that's why we have to talk about this stuff as it arises and sometimes even before it arises, because if we know things are happening early, we have to start these conversations early and not freak out. Because the other thing we know is when you talk to kids and they freak out, they don't want to talk to you anymore.
Right.
With your response.
Right. Deal with that. Right.
There's something that Bishop always says. He talks to us and he tells us that our fathers are the ones who give us our identity. And one of the things that I always think about is like John the Baptist. Like he would not have been the forerunner to Jesus and done everything he was able to do had his father not said the right things about him. So we have to make sure that we as parents, as the influence, as the authority in these children's lives, we tell them who they are. Because you can't let no 2-year-old figure out who they are. They want to be a giraffe.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So it's up to us as parents, as those authority figures, as those aunties, uncles, whoever, that position of respect that they hold. It's up to us to shape their destiny, shape their identity, and make sure that we're saying the right things about them. We're saying what God has said about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. And then what kids are exposed to, I think about this, and I think I shared this before on one of our shows, but when I was young, I used to want to be white and have long hair. And I'll never forget, like the girls in my school, they did the hair and it moved and they have to get the hair pressed and all the grease and stuff. And so I used to go home as a kid. I must have been like 7 years old, 6 or 7. And I would, we used to wear tights all the time, wear stockings, we wore tight skirts. I would go get a pair of white stockings because I wanted to have long blonde hair, put my stockings on and had those too big. It would be like just those legs. I would act like a white girl, and like you said, like they want to be a giraffe, they want to be a dog. I wanted to be a little white girl with long hair. If my mother, let me help you start getting your skin bleached, and let's get these things. That's horrible parenting if you cannot shape and form the curiosity of a child who says they see something, they're impressed with it. Oh, I want to be this today. You don't start, okay, well, you're a child, you're 7 years old, you decide that you want to have a different sex. No, honey, it don't work like that. You might have that feeling, but let's talk about it. God made you this way. You are not going to be anything but the way God made you. And I'm going to help you deal with whatever is impressing upon you to make you feel like you want to be something else. Let's have that conversation.
Right.
But I think we're ill-equipped. We're ill-equipped as adults and responsible parents that, we don't have some conversations because we don't know the answer.
True. And it's funny you say that, Teresa, because one of the things, like, as I was raising my kids, because I just felt, nobody really prepares you for parenthood. I don't care how many books you read. I don't care how much you pray, all that stuff. Like when you're in the heat of it, you just feel so inadequate. And I remember like thinking about like the 3 Hebrew boys, like Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys, and like their parents had to have been like really, really good parents for those kids to be that strong to stand up against governmental, because I think about, would my kids have been able to stand like that? Did I raise them well enough to be able to stand like that, or have such a strong conviction about what was right and about what God said, and I always thought, I want to be parents like their parents were, because I would want my kids to be able to not just stand for the morality, but be able to spread that morality. Like I always prayed that they would be the ones to influence their friends to righteousness, because I knew that they would be exposed to different people from different backgrounds. Some people have no sense of religion, Christianity, no sense of God at all. And so, when they came into contact with those type of people, would they have been able to stand? Would they make the right decisions even when nobody's looking?
Yeah. That's good. And I love you had me at the first line, Dana, that none of us have instruction guides. So I pray for everyone who is a parent. And I say this often, that, we're doing many of us are doing the very, very best that we can. So we give each other grace. But I also think that you want to surround yourself with other parents who is saying exactly what Dana is saying, is doing what I'm trying to do. And that is to raise well-rounded, God-fearing leaders. That's what we're trying to do. And sometimes it's tough. Sometimes you do the best you can and they still make poor choices. Right. But then parenting is not about beating ourselves up or being arrogant to think, oh, somebody's going to judge me as a parent. It's to say, how can I help my kids get back on the right track?
Yes.
And I beat myself up every day, but I also give myself grace, because new mercies come in the morning. So I'm like, thank you, God, for new mercies.
Yes. Well, ladies, as we get ready to wrap up this conversation, I'm so sad we lost little Joya. But what are your final parting thoughts to our audience as we get ready to close this conversation? Teresa.
I think I'm so grateful that we're even having this platform. Thank you, Mark, for allowing us to do this and spread more information or start conversation. I do want to respond to one question. Somebody said, how do you talk to kids if you don't think they have any clue about it? And do you think it'll pique their curiosity? At some point, their curiosity is going to be piqued. So why not open that avenue with the right education about it, so they're not making a mistake out of somebody that's misinforming them. I don't think that it's any age limit that is too early to start talking about it if they can have that conversation, or if they have a curiosity about it. Somebody said, please do a part 2. I think that it's a necessary conversation that we need to have again and again.
Yeah.
Yep. Dr. Batista.
I would just say, again, I love this conversation. I love talking about it with you ladies. I think we've all got different experiences, but some commonalities as well. I would just say we are the church, and the church is not a building. The church is a representation of who Christ is and how he wants us to be. And it's not enough that we just say, don't do it. We are educated. This is the 21st century. So if you don't know what to say, there are resources, there are books. I want to address really quickly what Bishop Travis said, because I think it's important with all this online learning and virtual stuff that we're doing. Online predators are there. Do not leave your children to chance as it relates to what they're doing. Get in their stuff all the time and use that as a jumping board for those conversations.
Yeah. I would piggyback off of that. The only reason I got on social media is because Gabby got Facebook, and I wanted to see what she was doing and who she was connecting with, because like you said, those online predators are there, and we definitely don't give your kids too much privacy, because you don't want to give them too much space to get into things that we don't want them to get into. But if we as believers continue to have these honest, open, candid conversations, if we take the narrative back about sex and remember that God invented sex, and if we do as Matisa said and talk about everything in the church, then we can give a new generation a perspective that has all things new.
I love it. This was great. Thank you,
This has been
ladies.
a great conversation. No,
Yeah.
before we go, let's say two things. Now, Teresa, you already did this. We thank Mark Moore Jr. for this amazing platform and this amazing audience. Thank you to all the faithful people. But if you haven't had a chance to go to do it, now he broke into our singles conversation to tell everybody about conferenceinaClick.com.
Yes.
Oh, that's an amazing product. Oh my
It's an
God.
amazing product.
You guys, please check it out. Conference
Yeah,
in a Click
go.
is everything. You
It
can
is
have your own
literally
YLC.
everything. It is
Yeah,
literally everything.
literally
We're so
everything
grateful for
that we
watching.
all worked on. We all have
We're
a
all
lot of work.
contributors. It's a
Yeah.
lot of great information, and we love YLC and having these amazing
Absolutely.
platforms to have these conversations. So make sure you tune in to YLC TV. We're doing great things. We love you.
I know. You guys have an amazing weekend.
See
Love
you
you.
next week.
Bye.